In Los Angeles, where the spotlight never goes out, Jimmy Kimmel was preparing for a show that would be either a triumph or a disaster. Social networks were buzzing with accusations. His show was called either too soft or too sharp. But when he invited Jimmy Fallon, a man who knew what it was like to laugh through pressure, no one expected their conversation to expose the truth about an industry America had loved for decades. Why did Fallon come forward with a statement that could have destroyed them both? And how did Kimmel, standing on the edge of a cliff, decide to listen instead of fight? Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments which state you're watching this video from. The ABC studio in Los Angeles, home to Jimmy Kimmel Live, buzzed with electricity. Spotlights hummed, technicians darted between cameras, and the green rooms thrummed with activity. Tonight's episode promised to be special. Jimmy Kimmel had invited his longtime colleague and rival, Jimmy Fallon, host of The Tonight Show. For an audience over 55, raised on late-night talk shows, this was like a meeting of legends, David Letterman and Jay Leno in their prime. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere was anything but celebratory. Jimmy Kimmel sat in his dressing room, clutching a sheet with the show's rundown. His gaze was intense, brows furrowed. Recent weeks had seen social media erupt with criticism. Some accused him of bias for his political jokes, others of being too soft on controversial guests. For the 57-year-old host, who prided himself on balancing humor with edge, it felt like a slap. Tonight, though, he had a chance to set things right. Inviting Fallon, known for his warmth and conflict avoidance, was no accident. Kimmel wanted to show that comedy could unite, not divide. Muffled voices drifted from outside the dressing room. The show's producer, Allison, knocked and entered, holding a tablet. Her face was pale. "Jimmy, we got a problem," she said, nervously adjusting her glasses. Social media's blowing up. Someone from Fallon's team posted that he's planning to make a statement on the show, something about toxic culture in talk shows. "People think it's aimed at you." Kimmel leaned back, his fingers tightening on the paper. "You're kidding," he said, his voice calm but eyes flashing. "He comes on my show to throw shade?" Allison shrugged. "We don't know if it's true, but if he's planning something, it could explode. The audience is already skeptical after all those articles about you and Fallon." Kimmel knew what she meant. In 2023, Rolling Stone published a piece about a toxic environment on Fallon's The Tonight Show, accusing him of erratic behavior and pressuring his team. Kimmel had dodged similar scandals, but his own show wasn't flawless. Gossip about tensions between the hosts, fueled by ratings wars, only added fuel to the fire. "All right," Kimmel said, standing. "Where is he now?" "In the dressing room across the hall. He wants to talk before the show." Kimmel nodded, feeling heat rise in his chest. He didn't like confrontations, but if Fallon was planning to play dirty, he was ready to respond. Yet instead of anger, Kimmel chose another path, the one that always set him apart: dialogue. Fallon's dressing room smelled of coffee and hairspray. Jimmy Fallon, in his signature blue suit, sat before a mirror, scrolling through his phone. His usually smiling face was tense. Seeing Kimmel in the doorway, he stood. "Jimmy." Fallon tried to smile, but it was strained. "Good to see you, man." "Likewise," Kimmel replied, closing the door. "But let's cut to it. What's this statement everyone's talking about?" Fallon sighed, looking away. "Look, I wasn't planning anything against you. It's complicated. I want to talk about what's happening in our industry. The pressure, the expectations. How we, as hosts, sometimes become hostages to our own image." Kimmel crossed his arms. "And you decided to do this on my show? Without a heads up?" "I thought you'd get it," Fallon said, his voice wavering. "After everything in the press, I just want to be honest. Older folks, our core audience, they're tired of fakeness. They want truth." Kimmel felt anger mixed with curiosity. Fallon didn't seem like someone out to start a scandal for ratings. There was a vulnerability in his eyes Kimmel rarely saw in peers. "All right," Kimmel said, softening his tone. "If you want truth, let's do it together. Not as enemies." as people who know what this job is. Fallon looked surprised. You serious? Dead serious. But if you try to throw me under the bus, I'll turn this into a comedy roast right on air, Kimmel said with a grin, though his eyes stayed sharp. Fallon laughed, and the tension in the room eased slightly. An hour before airtime, the studio filled with audience members. The crowd, mostly over 55, buzzed with anticipation. They'd heard rumors of a potential clash between the hosts, which only heightened their excitement. The air smelled of popcorn and perfume, and dim lighting created a theatrical vibe. On stage, the house band played a jazzy tune, but even the music couldn't drown out the audience's whispers. Kimmel stood backstage, adjusting his tie. Adrenaline pulsed through him. Allison ran up, clutching her phone. Jimmy, social media's going nuts. Someone's saying Fallon's planning to apologize for something. Others say you two fought in the dressing room. Let them talk, Kimmel said, eyeing the stage. The important thing is we're on the same page. Allison sighed. I hope you know what you're doing. Kimmel didn't reply. He knew this episode could either ruin his reputation or become a moment everyone remembered. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of dust and electrical equipment, and stepped onto the stage. As the show's theme music blared, the audience erupted in applause. Kimmel walked out, his smile as confident as ever, though his eyes scanned the crowd. He opened with a light monologue, joking about LA weather and recent political news, earning laughs. But everyone was waiting for the main event, Fallon's entrance. Tonight, we have a special guest, Kimmel said, his tone growing serious. Someone who knows what it's like to host a talk show, to laugh through tears, and to survive this crazy industry. Please welcome Jimmy Fallon. The audience roared as Fallon walked out, waving and smiling. But his movements betrayed tension, like he was walking on thin ice. They shook hands, and Kimmel gestured for him to sit. So Jimmy, Kimmel began, leaning back. Rumor has it you came here to call me out. That true? The audience laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. Fallon rubbed his palms, his smile widening, but eyes serious. You know, I thought about it, he said, sparking more laughter. But seriously, I'm here to talk about something important. About how we, as hosts, sometimes lose ourselves trying to be what the audience wants. Kimmel nodded, his gaze attentive. Go on, he said. Fallon paused, gathering his thoughts. The last few years have been tough. For me, for you, for everyone in this industry. We laugh on camera, but backstage. Sometimes it's chaos. And I want to be honest with these people, he nodded at the audience, because they deserve the truth. The room fell silent. Everyone sensed something extraordinary was about to happen. Kimmel leaned forward, his hands resting calmly on the desk. And what's that truth, Jimmy? He asked, his voice soft but commanding. Fallon met his eyes. The truth is, we've both made mistakes. I know I have. And I want to apologize to my team, to the people who work with me, for times when I wasn't my best self. The audience erupted in applause, but Kimmel raised a hand, calling for quiet. That's brave, he said, but let's be fully honest. Do you think I've got some blame to share? Because I'm ready to hear it. Those words stunned everyone. The audience froze. Technicians backstage exchanged shocked glances. Fallon looked thrown, but quickly recovered. I'm not here to point fingers, he said. But I think we both know how this industry can weigh on you. And sometimes we take that pressure out on others. Kimmel nodded, his face calm, but eyes sparking with understanding. You know, he said, I invited you here thinking we'd just joke and move on. But you're right. Let's talk about this. Not as rivals, but as people trying to do something good. The episode continued, with Kimmel and Fallon's conversation growing more candid. They discussed ratings pressure, audience expectations, and the challenge of staying true to themselves under scrutiny. The audience, expecting a scandal, was captivated. Older viewers, who remembered Johnny Carson's era, felt they were witnessing something real, a moment when two hosts dropped their masks. But backstage, tension mounted. Allison received a text from network execs. Ratings were soaring, but some advertisers were unhappy with the too serious tone. A producer approached her, whispering, "If they go too far, we'll lose sponsors. We need to stop them." Allison looked at the monitor, where Kimmel and Fallon continue their talk. She knew this moment could change everything, not just for the show, but for the industry. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was thick with tension, almost tangible. The audience, mostly over 55, sat breathless, eyes glued to the two Jimmys, Kimmel and Fallon, seated at the center stage desk. Spotlights cast soft shadows, and the low hum of air conditioning mingled with the crowd's whispers. The scent of floor polish and perfume added a theatrical edge. What began as a standard talk show had become something more, a moment of truth that could reshape how a generation viewed late-night TV. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, fingers lightly tapping the desk. He just challenged Fallon to be fully honest, no hiding behind jokes or stage personas. Fallon, hands still nervously clasped, glanced at the audience as if seeking support. His blue suit was impeccable, but a slightly unbuttoned shirt and tousled hair betrayed inner turmoil. "All right, Jimmy," Fallon said, his voice quiet but resolute. "If we're being honest, let's talk about what hurts. About how we as hosts sometimes forget who's behind our shows. Our teams, the people who write jokes, set up cameras, build sets. They work past midnight, and we get all the glory." The audience erupted in applause, not the loud, automatic kind that followed jokes, but a genuine, grateful roar. Older viewers, many who'd spent their lives in regular jobs, connected with the sentiment. Kimmel nodded, his eyes glinting with understanding. "You're right," he replied, his voice softer. "I remember starting as a comic in small clubs. No glory, just you and your team believing in you. But when you're hosting a show like this," he gestured around the studio, "it's easy to forget you're not alone." Fallon smiled, but it was bittersweet. "You know, after that Rolling Stone article, I got hundreds of messages. Some from people I've worked with for years. They wrote that they were afraid to tell me the truth. That I could be harsh. Not because I'm a bad person, but because the pressure of this job makes you lose yourself." Kimmel leaned forward, his gaze intent but not judgmental. "And what did you do with that?" he asked. Fallon sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I started listening. Held meetings with the team, no producers, no cameras. Asked them to be honest. And you know what I realized? They don't want me to be perfect. They just want me to see them." The audience clapped again, softer this time, as if processing the weight of his words. Kimmel felt warmth rise in his chest. He knew Fallon was taking a risk, opening up like this to millions. But he also knew he couldn't stay on the sidelines. "I'm not perfect," Kimmel said, his voice steady but strong. "There were times I yelled at producers, ignored writers' ideas because I thought I knew better. And I owe my team for that. But I'm learning. And today," he looked at Fallon, "I'm learning from you." Those words hit like thunder. The audience froze, then exploded in applause that seemed to shake the studio walls. People stood, their faces glowing with emotion. For them, a generation raised on Carson and Letterman, this was a moment when two hosts revealed themselves not as untouchable stars, but as humans capable of owning their flaws. As Kimmel and Fallon continued, backstage was chaos. Allison stood by the monitors, her phone buzzing nonstop. Network execs were in a panic, one texting, "This is too much. Get back to jokes, or we'll lose advertisers." Allison bit her lip, eyes darting between the monitor and her phone. She knew the episode was going viral. Social media was ablaze with clips of the conversation, called historic. But she also knew the industry hated risks. If the show strayed too far from its format, the fallout could be catastrophic. She ran to the director, stationed at the control panel, and whispered, "We need to signal them to pivot to jokes. We can't let this go on." The director, an older man named Ted who'd been in TV since the 80s, shook his head. "Allison, you see what's happening? These two are doing something nobody's done since Oprah. If we stop them, we lose something bigger than money." Allison clenched her fists. She knew Ted was right, but the pressure from above was unbearable. She glanced at the monitor, where Kimmel was sharing a story about snapping at an intern over a trivial issue and still regretting it. The audience listened, rapt, and Fallon nodded, his eyes glistening. On stage, Kimmel felt time slow. He saw the audience looking at him and Fallon not as celebrities, but as people speaking to their concerns. It was a new sensation, like he wasn't just entertaining, but changing something. "You know," Kimmel said, turning to Fallon, "I invited you here thinking we'd laugh and move on. But now I see we can do more. We can show that even in this crazy industry, there's room for humanity." Fallon nodded, his voice hoarse. "I agree. But it's not just about us. It's about everyone working backstage. The people who don't get applause, but make us possible." Kimmel smiled, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "Then let's do something unexpected," he said. "Let's bring someone from our teams out here, right now. Let them say what they think." The audience gasped. Fallon looked stunned, but quickly recovered. "You serious?" he asked, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Absolutely," Kimmel replied, turning to the crowd. "Who wants to hear the truth from the people who make these shows happen?" The audience roared, clapping so loudly it seemed the ceiling shook. Allison, watching backstage, felt her heart skip. She knew this was either a brilliant move or a disaster. Kimmel stood and gestured to a young woman from the writing team, Sarah, to join them. She was one of the joke writers, rarely seen in public. Her hands trembled as she approached the mic, but Kimmel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Sarah," he said, "tell us what it's like working on the show." No filter. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the crowd. In her 30s, with short brown hair and a tired but determined look, she spoke. "It's tough," she began, her voice shaky. "We love this job, but sometimes you feel invisible. You write a joke that makes millions laugh, but nobody knows your name. And when the pressure's on, when deadlines are tight, sometimes you get yelled at or your ideas are brushed off." The room fell silent. Kimmel and Fallon listened, not interrupting. Sarah continued. "But I stayed because I believe in this show. And I see Jimmy," she glanced at Kimmel, "trying to be better. He's not perfect, but he listens. And that means a lot." Kimmel felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected Sarah's words to hit so hard. Fallon, standing nearby, placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's what I was talking about," Fallon said softly. "We can change this. Together." The episode ended, but its echoes spread worldwide. Clips of Kimmel, Fallon, and Sarah went viral. People shared videos, posting about how rare such honesty was on TV. For the over 55 audience, used to the gloss of talk shows, it was a breath of fresh air. They saw Kimmel and Fallon not just as stars, but as people owning their mistakes and striving for change. Backstage, though, the story was far from over. Network execs summoned Allison for an urgent meeting, demanding answers. Advertisers threatened to pull funding if the show didn't return to a safe format. Kimmel and Fallon, sitting in the dressing room post-show, knew their actions had consequences. "We opened Pandora's box," Fallon said, holding a water bottle. "But I don't regret it." Kimmel smiled, his eyes tired but calm. "Neither do I. If we lose a few sponsors, but show people TV can be real, it's worth it." Morning sun bathed Los Angeles in soft golden light, reflecting off skyscraper glass. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was quiet. Technicians cleaned up post-show, and the scent of coffee and dust lingered. Kimmel sat in his office, scrolling through news on his phone. Headlines screamed, "Kimmel and Fallon shocked the world. End of fake talk shows, TV revolution, or career suicide." Social media buzzed with comments, especially from those over 55, filled with awe. They called the episode a moment that restored faith in TV. But backstage, a storm was brewing. Allison burst into Kimmel's office, tablet in hand. Her face was pale, voice trembling. "Jimmy, we need to talk. The network's furious. 2 major sponsors are threatening to pull out unless we fix this." They say the show got too political, too serious. Kimmel leaned back, fingers tapping the desk. He looked calm, but his eyes burned with resolve. Political, he echoed, raising an eyebrow. We talked about humanity, Allison. About treating the people who work with us right. If that's political to them, maybe the problem's not us. Allison sighed, lowering her tablet. I agree, but you know how this works. They want jokes, levity, predictability. And you and Fallon. You broke the script. Literally. Kimmel smiled, but it was bittersweet. Maybe that's exactly what we needed. New York. Fallon takes a stand. Meanwhile, in New York, Fallon sat in the Tonight Show offices at Rockefeller Center. Fresh off his LA trip, his team awaited him with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Post-Kimmel show, social media was ablaze with support, but critics accused Fallon of looking weak. For the 50-year-old host, always proud of his warmth, it stung. He gathered his team in a conference room. About 30 people, writers, camera operators, assistants, sat around a long table, clutching coffee cups, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with faint traces of paper and markers. Fallon stood before them, his blue sweater cozy, but his eyes serious. I know you've all heard about last night's episode, he began, his voice quiet but firm. And I know some of you might think I lost it, opening up like that to millions. Chuckles rippled through the room, but Fallon raised a hand for silence. But I want you to know, I told the truth. And I want us to make this show better together. Not for ratings, not for sponsors, but for us. For the people who work here every day. A writer, a young man named Dan, raised his hand. Jimmy, it's great you're saying this. But what can we actually do? We all feel the pressure, deadlines, expectations, everything. Fallon nodded, his face thoughtful. For starters, I want regular meetings where you can speak openly. No fear of getting fired or ignored. And I want us to rethink the schedule. If someone's working past midnight, it should be the exception, not the rule. The team exchanged surprised glances. A senior assistant, Linda, in her 60s, raised her hand. I've been in this industry 30 years, she said, her voice firm but warm. And I've never seen a host so openly admit their mistakes. If you're serious, Jimmy, I'm with you. The room erupted in applause. Fallon felt warmth spread through his chest. He knew it was just the beginning, but his team's support gave him hope. Los Angeles. Kimmel faces a storm. The next day, Kimmel sat in the office of ABC's president, Mark Davis. The spacious room had panoramic windows overlooking the Hollywood Hills. The scent of expensive cologne and leather furniture filled the air. Davis, a 60-something man with silver hair, looked irritated. Jimmy, you know I respect you, he began, his voice low and sharp. But that episode was a mistake. We lost one sponsor, and 2 more are on the edge. You turned a comedy show into, what? A therapy session. Kimmel sat calmly, hands resting on his knees. He felt anger rising, but remembered his promise, to act through dialogue, not aggression. Mark, I hear you, he said, his voice even. But look at the numbers. Ratings skyrocketed. People are saying they finally felt TV was speaking with them, not at them. Davis shook his head. Ratings are great, but sponsors pay for predictability. They don't want risks. Kimmel leaned forward, his eyes flashing. What if we show them predictability is the past? Older folks, our core audience, are tired of fakeness. They want truth, Mark. And we can give them that without losing the humor. Davis sighed, fingers tapping the desk. You're taking a gamble, Jimmy. If this doesn't work, you could lose the show. Kimmel smiled, his face calm but determined. If I lose the show but leave something real behind, I'm willing to take that risk. Weeks passed. Kimmel and Fallon hadn't seen each other since the episode, but their actions sparked a chain reaction. Kimmel implemented new rules on his show, regular team meetings where everyone could speak, and shorter hours for backstage staff. Sarah, the writer who spoke on air, got a promotion, now leading a group of young writers. Allison, though nervous about sponsor pressure, began developing a new show format blending humor with moments of sincerity. In New York, Fallon went further. He invited union reps to discuss working conditions and launched a social media campaign urging other talk show hosts to be open with their teams. His show lost one sponsor, but gained support from new brands wanting to align with Honest TV. The over 55 audience, witnesses to that episode, kept sharing their thoughts. Letters to the network poured in, with people saying they felt TV wasn't just entertainment anymore, but a place for real conversations. A 67-year-old retiree from California wrote to Kimmel, "I saw Johnny Carson, I saw Letterman. But what you and Fallon did, it's new. Thank you for reminding us humanity still exists." One evening, Kimmel stood on the studio roof, holding a glass of whiskey. Los Angeles sparkled below, its lights twinkling like stars. He thought about that episode, Fallon's words, Sarah, his team. He knew the industry wouldn't change overnight. Sponsors still pushed, critics still wrote scathing articles, and ratings wars persisted. But the small step taken that night had already begun to shift something. In New York, Fallon sat in his dressing room, reading letters from viewers. One from an elderly Boston teacher ended, "You and Kimmel showed that even in the loudest industry, there's room for quiet where we can hear each other. Keep going." Kimmel and Fallon didn't know what lay ahead. Would they sustain this momentum? Could they stand against an industry built on gloss and fakeness? The answer was unclear, but the hope born that night shone brightly. And for the people who watched that episode, that was enough. The studio would fill again with laughter, jokes, and applause. But now, in that laughter, there'd be something new, an echo of truth no one could silence.